So I think that we'd like to ask you about that, if you can maybe have that explained. And plus the other scenario that brings up is, will the conservative portions of the Republican Party and the Tea Party people be willing to accept that? In some cases, they've been very hard on candidates that have changed parties, let's say in recent history. In other cases, they haven't for some reason. So how do you bridge that gap?
All right. I really appreciate you bringing this up, because I would like to tell my story that way.
Okay.
So I grew up a Republican, campaigned by my parents' side. I was a Republican all through the early years of my life, for the first 10 or 12 years of my voting life. And I actually went to Washington as a young Republican under President Ford, and had dinner with then CIA Director George Bush Sr., who then later became a president, somebody I admired deeply. And that moment, that night, was a really inspirational moment for me. You know how there are those times in your life where you just, like, you remember what was going through your head. And I was sitting there talking to him, and I thought, I want to do something for my country as great as he is doing for his country, for our country. And then the Republicans changed their national platform around a woman's reproductive choices. And I was a physician and a young woman, and I felt it infringed upon my personal liberties and what I believed in. Having worked with many young women in my career. And so I left the party, as did many other women at the time. I felt like I was not welcome, and I felt excluded. And I became a Democrat.
This was what years?
Late 80s.
Late 80s.
Late 80s. And I was a Democrat throughout the next, almost not quite 2 decades, but almost. And over time, it became very clear to me that I couldn't stay a Democrat for 2 reasons. The first one, and this became very clear when I was working for Mitt, was that as a public leader, you must make decisions in the public's best interest, and you're not free to do that if you are beholden to the unions for votes and money. And the second thing was, I believe that the Democrats are being dishonest with the American people about the fiscal tsunami that we are facing and that we must address, or our children are not going to have even any of the basic freedoms that are so dear to me. Ironically, my values haven't changed in all these years. The party's changed. I have always valued individual liberties, cherished them, grew up in a household where that was so important. That actually my family could say, you can go and do what you want to do. I have always believed that the way to have freedom is to be fiscally responsible. Being in debt enslaves us, and it takes away our freedoms. And that is the problem we're dealing with now. And I also have always believed that every American has a responsibility and does have something to contribute to our nation. I feel very strongly about it, and I felt that way when I had dinner with George Bush, and I feel that way today. And before I made a decision to run, I reached out to Sean Bilot and his team, and he was not going to run. I sat down and I met with the GOP leadership, and I said to them, is there room in Massachusetts for me to come back to the party? And I said, this is where I stand, and this is where I'm going to stand. I've stood here since I was knee-high. And they said, yes, we want you back in the party. We need people like you to come back to the party, actually. And I went through a battle in the late 80s when we were excluding people from the party, and it was bad. It was really hard for young women like me, young professional women, to be a part of this party at that time. And I thought, thank heavens I live in Massachusetts, where you can hold the values that I hold, and you can still be a Republican. And so after meeting with the state GOP leaders, I made a decision that I would return to my roots and be the pro-choice Republican that I am. And Sean, actually over the summer, released his staff to us. He wasn't going to run, and we picked up his communications director, who's staying with us, Lisa Barster. She's a great person. And we interviewed a lot of the other staff, and some of them went back with him actually when he changed his mind and decided to run. He had moved out of state and given up his residency. He wasn't here, and he wasn't going to run, as far as I understood, and what he told party leaders that he wasn't going to run. And then, as we know, when the district changed, and then Barney Frank decided he wasn't going to run, it was an open seat. And I think he has every right to come back and run. He has every right to move back to run. So that is what happened, and that is why I'm here. And I'm proud to be a Republican in Massachusetts. I don't know if I could have done this in North Dakota, but I can do that in Massachusetts. And I believe that our party has to be big enough for people to belong to it who do hold different values, because we really agree on 95% of everything. And it is, if we don't deal with these big issues around the debt, all the other freedoms are not going to matter, because we are going to be enslaved, and we are not going to have nearly the kinds of freedoms that we take for granted, we say. So that's the story.